The crate breathed. I had hauled freight on the Solveig's debt for 11 years, and a crate had never once breathed, and I was standing in the aft hold at 4 in the ship's morning with my hand flat against cold composite, feeling it rise and fall like something asleep. The manifest said agricultural seed stock, Thresher bound, 40 kilos, no further markings. The manifest was a lie. I just didn't know yet whose. I popped the seal with the multi-tool I kept for exactly this kind of trouble, and the lid came up on hinges somebody had oiled recently, somebody who'd planned for it to open quiet. Inside, packed in shredded insulation foam like she was something fragile being shipped instead of something alive being hidden, was a child. Lavender skin, the color going pale at the joints from the cold. Eyes closed, and even closed I could see a faint underglow at the lids, the kind of marking that meant somebody's bloodline mattered to somebody else. She couldn't have weighed 30 pounds. She didn't cry out when the light hit her. She just opened her eyes, looked at me with an exhausted, assessing calm that no child should already own, and said one word in a language my translator caught half a second late. Hide. I'd been running cold routes long enough to know what kind of cargo got smuggled in seed stock crates, and it was never seed stock. Spice, sometimes. Weapons, occasionally, and I'd turned those over to the nearest authority without a second thought, because weapons in the wrong hands were a problem I understood. This was a different problem. This was a problem with a heartbeat and a word for what she needed from me already loaded in her mouth before she'd even seen my face clearly. I checked the seal markings on the crate's underside, the place a manifest fraud leaves its real fingerprints. Thresher Relay Station, consigned through a shell trading house I'd never heard of, which meant somebody local had paid to make this crate disappear into legitimate freight, and paid well, because that kind of forged seal wasn't cheap. Somebody had sealed a child into agricultural cargo and put her on my ship hoping nobody would look. Somebody had been desperate enough to gamble a stranger's indifference against whatever was hunting her a home. I looked down at her. She looked back up at me, weary, and did not look away. Okay, I said, mostly to myself. Okay. I didn't have a name for her yet. She gave me one 20 minutes later, once I'd gotten her wrapped in a thermal blanket and sitting on a crate of actual seed stock with a ration bar she ate like she hadn't trusted food in days. Ilsha. One syllable, then another, offered without prompting, like she'd decided I'd earned that much and not one thing more. The Solveig's debt was 4 days out from Thresher when I found her. That gave me 4 days to decide what kind of liar I was about to become, and about 19 hours of it before the ship's comm lit up with a hail I didn't like the shape of. Debt collection traffic has a cadence to it. Polite on the surface, procedural in its language, and underneath that, patient in the specific way of people who get paid whether the job takes an hour or a month. The hail that came in over Thresher Approach Control identified itself as a licensed collection agency, working a claim against a defaulted household on a colony 3 jumps behind me, and it asked, politely, procedurally, whether any vessel inbound to Thresher had picked up unmanifested cargo matching a juvenile of a specific bloodline marking in the last standard week. I did not answer that hail. I logged it as routine traffic and kept flying. Il sat very still in the cabin doorway while I worked the nav console, and when I glanced back at her she said, quiet, they will check the seals. I know. They checked my mother's seals. She said it the way you'd report weather. Flat. Already lived through. That is how they found the others. I didn't ask what others. Her face told me not to, and I'd learned a long time ago which questions you don't get to ask a person who's already paying a price for the answer. I told her instead what I needed from her, plainly, because she was old enough to be trusted with a plan and too smart to be lied to about the danger in it. When we dock, men are going to come through my cargo with a manifest scanner and a description of you. I'm going to make it so the scanner finds nothing and the description doesn't match anything in my hold. That means you sit very still, and you let me make you into cargo I actually own. Can you do that? She studied me for a long moment, the underglow at her eyes catching the cabin light. You could give me to them. The reward is large. I know that too. Why won't you? I didn't have a clean answer, so I gave her the true one instead. Because somebody sealed you into a box and bet a stranger's decency against everything chasing you, and I'm not going to be the stranger who proves that bet wrong. She didn't say anything else. She just nodded, once, like a transaction had been settled, and went back to being still. Thresher Relay Station was a grey ring of docking arms and customs lights, and the collection agency's cutter was already moored 2 berths down from mine when traffic control walked me in. I had spent the last hours of the flight doing the kind of work that doesn't show up as heroism from the outside, rewriting cargo manifests, restamping seals, moving ILS into a maintenance crawlspace behind a false panel I'd built into the engineering deck for exactly the kind of contraband I used to actually believe in smuggling, back before tonight. I logged the seed stock crate as delivered and consumed in transit, a common enough loss on cold routes, accounted for and gone. On paper, by the time I docked, there had never been a child on my ship at all. 3 of them came aboard. Professional, armored light, the kind of calm that comes from doing this exact job 100 times and never once losing. Their lead carried a manifest scanner and a photograph rendered from a description. Lavender skin, underglow markings, small. He held it up to me without preamble. Routine sweep. We have reason to believe a juvenile matching this profile may have been transported aboard your vessel in the last 72 hours. Wasn't, I said. You'll understand we check regardless. I'd check too, in your boots. I stepped back and let them in, because refusing a sweep is its own confession, and I had built my lie to survive scrutiny, not to avoid it. They went through the hold with the scanner sweeping bio readings against cargo manifest, crate by crate, and I walked beside their lead with my hands loose at my sides and my pulse doing something I kept off my face through 11 years of practice at looking bored around people with weapons. The scanner pinged twice on residual organic signatures, a meal I'd eaten in the hold 2 days back, a rat that had stowed away out of Kettering and died behind a bulkhead, God rest it, and both times the lead checked it against the manifest, found a mundane explanation logged in my own handwriting, and moved on. He stopped at the false panel. Not because he'd found anything. Because it was simply the next section of bulkhead, and his scanner sweep pattern brought him there in its ordinary course, and for 3 full seconds I understood exactly how thin the difference is between a plan that works and a plan that doesn't. Maintenance access, I said, before he could ask. Coolant runs. You're welcome to open it, but mind the line. It's been leaking phosphogel for a week and I haven't had the parts to fix the seal. It wasn't true. There was no leak. But men who carry manifest scanners for a living also carry a healthy respect for industrial gas leaks they didn't budget time to deal with, and his hand paused on the panel latch exactly as long as it takes a professional to weigh inconvenience against thoroughness and choose the version that gets him home on schedule. He moved on. They finished the sweep 40 minutes later and found nothing, because there was nothing left to find on any record that existed anywhere outside my own skull and a 4-year-old girl's memory, and the lead thanked me for my cooperation in the same flat procedural tone he'd used to threaten it, and they left. I stood in the empty hold a long time after their cutter cleared the berth, before I went and opened the false panel and found Elle sitting exactly where I'd left her, knees drawn up, underglow eyes open in the dark, waiting to find out which kind of stranger I'd turned out to be. They're gone, I said. She didn't cry, didn't run to me, didn't do any of the things a story might want from a moment like that. She just exhaled, long and slow, like she'd been holding that breath since the crate first sealed shut around her 3 jumps and 4 days ago, and said, "The manifest. What does it say now? That you never existed. That a meal went bad and a rat died in my bulkhead and a coolant line's been leaking phosphogel I haven't had the parts to fix." I crouched down to her eye level, because some things you only say looking at a person straight on. On every record that matters to men like that, Ilse, you were never on this ship. And to you. I thought about the 11 years of cargo I'd hauled without once looking inside a crate that wasn't mine to open, the version of me that would have logged the hail, collected the reward, called it just business and slept fine. That version was still in here somewhere, quieter now, outvoted. To me, I said, you're the only true thing I've carried in a long time. We sat in the hold until the station's customs clock ticked over to a new shift, and somewhere 3 jumps back a debt collection agency would file a report noting an unsuccessful sweep and move on to the next lead. And a lie I'd built out of meal residue and a dead rat and a coolant line that never leaked would hold, because I'd built it too. Ilse fell asleep against my shoulder before I decided what came next for either of us, and I sat very still and let her, the way you sit still for something you finally decided is worth the keeping. The collection agency never came back. I heard, much later, secondhand, through the kind of channel that carries true things dressed as rumor, that the household behind the original claim had been quietly absorbed into a larger debt, written off as uncollectible, the trail gone cold at a relay station where a hauler's manifest had checked out clean 3 times running. Nobody ever connected the rat, the meal, the coolant line. Nobody was meant to. Ilse runs the nav board now, when we are between ports and nobodies watching the com traffic for collection hails. She's good at it. Better than I was at her age, though I never tell her that, because she'd only ask why it took me so long to be the kind of person who'd open a crate instead of logging the hail. I don't have a good answer for that either. I just know I'm glad I did.